Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this horror movie review. This is sort of a standalone horror movie review, and one thing I'm going to try to do this year is go to more, or at least see more, whether it's through streaming or at the theater, more released movies in 2022 or I'm sorry, 2023. I'm still living in 2022. Um, so this is going to be the first review in that light. These are going to be separate from my series that I have going on throughout the year, but yeah, I plan on seeing a lot of horror movies this year at the theater or streaming if it's available. So today we're going to go ahead and take a look at the first horror movie released in 2023, and that is the movie M3gan. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get into it. This will, of course, is going to be a spoiler-free review because the movie literally was just released 2 days ago. So I'm not going to give away too much. And this also isn't going to be a full-blown review like my typical reviews are. More of my initial thoughts, and I literally just came from the theater within the last half hour. So I just wanted to jump on here and give you guys my 2 cents on the movie M3gan. So just a little background. M3gan is a 2022 American science fiction horror film directed by Gerald Johnstone from a screenplay by Akela Cooper and a story by Cooper and James Wan. That's actually what got me to go, or why I was interested in seeing it, among other reasons. But James Wan's involvement, because I'm a big fan of his. Its plot follows Gamma, a robotist, at a toy company who creates an artificially intelligent doll named M3gan. When M3gan becomes attached to Gamma's orphan niece, Katie, she develops self awareness and becomes hostile to anyone who comes between her and Katie. M3gan's appearance is a combination of a physical performance by Amy Donald, practical makeup, and digital visual effects, while Jenna Davis voices the character. So, yeah, and so that's basically the gist of M3gan. As far as the cast goes, we have Allison Williams as Gamma, Violet McGraw as Katie, Amy Donald as M3gan, Jenna Davis as her voice, Ronnie Chiang as David Lynn, Brian Jordan Alvarez as Cole, Jen Van Epps as Tess, um, Stephanie Stefan Gnor Martin as Kurt, Jack Cassidy as Brandon, and Laurie Dungy as Celia. So yeah, that's sort of the setup. I'm not going to go too far into the plot as far like I normally do with my reviews. I'm just going to more or less wing it for you guys, but that's the gist of the movie with the cast and everything. So I knew going into this movie that it was a PG-13 movie, but I also know James Wan was involved in a pretty well-known and popular scary PG-13 movie, which of course is Insidious, um, which I've only seen once, actually, believe it or not. I'm going to be doing a series on that later this year, but that's neither here nor there. Um, so my expectations, I knew it wasn't an R-rated movie, so I knew it wasn't going to be a gore fest or anything. It was going to be more like creepiness and psychological. And for what it went for, I actually enjoyed this movie. I have to say, it's not groundbreaking or anything. It's basically artificial intelligence or a robot gone wrong. Which we've seen these kind of movies before, so they're not exactly cracking a new egg or reinventing the wheel. But this movie has quite a bit going for it, in my opinion, just on my initial thoughts here with having the movie in my head. So, it's basically about this woman, Gamma, played by Allison Williams, who basically she takes in her niece, who's at the very beginning of the movie. Her niece is riding with her parents, and they're in some kind of, I don't know where exactly they're going, but there's some sort of snow covered mountain or something, and basically they get plowed into by a snow truck. Parents are killed, and so Katie goes to live with Gamma. And Gamma's, of course, this big, smart robotist, which I didn't even know was actually a thing, a robotist. um, but she works for this large company who develops like all these sort of innovative toys and everything. And at the beginning of the movie, there's a couple other toys that are out there, like a Furby kind of thing. I forget the name of it, but then another company rips it off. So they're looking for something different, and basically Gemma develops this doll, this real life kind of doll named M3gan, which is an abbreviation for some technical jargon that it stands for. Um, but she's had problems launching it. She basically did it against her boss's will, spent all this money, and got to make it work. So That's kind of on the outskirts of the movie. What's going on in the first act, and then of course she's trying to develop some kind of relationship between her and Katie. And Gemma, of course, is a character played by Alison Williams who doesn't really isn't really she's kind of like a doctor in a sense. I can make this comparison. Like there's doctors that have really good bedside manner, and then there's doctors that really have the smarts and the technology. They know what's going on, and Gemma's definitely that. She's not so much doesn't have the emotions to connect with a child or even necessarily other people. She's more of like the really smart intellectual type. And so she's trying to form this relationship with Katie. And basically she decides that Megan will be a great companion for Katie, and that's kind of where the movie takes off. Um, so Katie kind of becomes, or I mean, Megan kind of becomes part of their threesome family there. Basically, for her at the beginning, it's to try to get her work done and basically send Katie away to go play with Megan while she does her robotics kind of stuff. So, like I said, I don't want to get too far into it. That's the gist of the movie. And then, as you can probably imagine, being a horror thriller movie, things don't quite go as planned for Gemma. So, but the things that I really enjoyed about this movie, just on an initial watch, um, the balance, the tone of this movie, I really enjoyed, and I have to give the director a lot of credit for that. Gerald Johnstone. Um, I thought he did a great job with sort of the tone of the movie and the balance between. There's some humor in this movie. There's some heart in this movie, and of course, there's some horror and thriller aspects of this movie. And I thought it all worked pretty well, to be honest with you. I didn't feel like one act was more horrific than the other. I didn't feel like any acts were lacking. There's sort of humor throughout, a little bit of heart at the beginning and the end. But yeah, I just thought he had a great balance to the movie. And then also kind of getting on the humor. That's probably the part that surprised me the most. I didn't know much about this director, so apparently his background's in humor from what I've read. And so I wasn't going into the movie, I wasn't really expecting a lot of humor in the movie. And it's definitely not a horror comedy or anything like that. It's not an overly silly horror movie, but there are definitely aspects of humor that really worked for me because it's a very dry sense of humor, which tends to work for me. That tends to be my humor sphere, if you will. I'm a dry sense of humor kind of person. Not that where it's not the overly obvious and trying to be funny kind of humor. So that really worked for me, and it was interesting because throughout the movie, from beginning to end, it had moments of that. Even if something was happening that would be horrific right before that or after that, or there's a moment where there's some heart involved and some sappy music, and then all of a sudden you get a good laugh out of it. The sort of the best example is some of the side characters in this movie discovering Megan for the first time and thinking she's a little girl, and then also all of a sudden realizing she's a robot. Some of their reactions. That's probably where I laughed the most. So yeah, I really enjoyed the humor in this movie, and as I said, it also has some heart to it. Talking about the emotions of losing close family members, obviously Katie losing her parents and the relationship that she doesn't really have with Gemma at the first two-thirds of the movie, and then they kind of try to develop that a little bit, but of course Megan kind of steps in between them. And but yeah, this movie's got some heart to it. I'm not going to say it's an overly sappy movie or anything. It's certainly not what it's based on, but it's a horror movie that it seemed like a lot of thought and effort went into. I guess that's the best way to say it. It's not a scary horror movie necessarily, especially for older people. Although I will say for a PG-13 movie, of course, you're not expecting to see blood or gore, which is good because you really don't. I think there's one scene where you see some blood on a knife or a machete or something that's used it's like a prop around that one of the characters uses. But other than that, of course, you kind of know what you're going to get when it's PG-13. It's going to be more like a couple of jump scares, which this movie I'll say doesn't have a whole lot of jump scares. It has a few. But they didn't rely on that, which I really appreciate. That's James Wan there, I'm sure. He doesn't rely on the jump scares, in my opinion, but more of the stuff that's going on in the background. Um, but yeah, just a great balance there. And so I wouldn't let the PG-13 part scare you. I wouldn't let it, I wouldn't not see this movie because, there's some young characters. It's definitely, I wouldn't say Though I would probably say this is a pretty good like introduction to horror for 13, 14, maybe even 11 or 12-year olds. But I wouldn't say the movie's intended specifically for them. I mean, this is a movie as an adult. I'm in my mid 40s for crying out loud. And I got some enjoyment out of it. Was I overly scared watching it? No, but I didn't expect to be. But I was curious, and I thought it was a story that, while not new, it unfolded pretty well for me, and I thought they did a really good job from the technical aspects. The movie has a good score. The performances, I have to say, are pretty good, led by Allison Williams and Violet McGraw. I thought those two had pretty good chemistry, or not chemistry, as it were, as their characters were meant. And I thought, I'm not gonna. The girl that played Megan, of course, it's kind of a three-pronged deal there. We have some CGI aspects, you have an actual small actress playing the body of Megan, and then you have the voice. But the voice I thought was effective and creepy. It had that sort of young girl robotic sort of voice, but could also be very menacing in that sort of creepy robotic way. So that worked for me. The look of Megan, it's fine. I mean, I wasn't overly blown away by it, but I also didn't think it was the worst I've ever seen for this type of movie. I thought it was fine. The third act of this movie, I thought, really ratcheted things up. Like the first two acts, the first act is kind of giving us a basis for the characters and the story and everything, kind of what's going on, and then introducing this artificial intelligence aspect. Then the second movie is them trying to come together and with some cohesion. And then, of course, the third act is kind of all hell breaks loose. And they have small hints leading up to it with a dog and a neighbor and a boy at a park. So it's not like you have to wait for the third act for any real horror or anything. They do a pretty good job having it throughout. But the third act is definitely the highlight in that regard. And of course, you got a big end fight, a big conclusion. Yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed this movie. As far as any cons, they gave away too much in the trailer, which you can pretty much say about any horror slash thriller movie nowadays. So that's not necessarily just a Megan thing. That's kind of whoever puts movie trailers together, they really need to do a better job of not giving so much away in the trailer. There's a way to do it, in my opinion, without showing everything. So that's one thing that I kind of knew a lot of what I was going to see because of those trailers. I wish they would do a better job on that. Other than that, I mean, yeah, there's CGI in it. Of course, I knew there would be with Megan. Some of the side characters aren't necessarily great, or they're not really supposed to be. They're just kind of there to help sell the story of the movie and stuff. I'm sure I'll be able to think of more negatives when I sit down and do a full blown review on this movie. I'm not saying that it's a perfect movie or anything, or horrifically scary, because it certainly isn't. But I thought that they really executed this movie well for what it is, and for an idea, like I said, that's not reinventing the wheel. They gave it their own spin, and James Wan definitely has his influence in this movie, as does the director, whose name I keep forgetting, Gerald Johnstone. I'm just not familiar with with the more of the comedy aspects of it, and Wan with more of the scare aspects of it. And of course, then you got the Blumhouse aspect. Jason Blum's involved in this movie. So overall, guys, I don't know. Just on my initial thoughts, I would give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. I think for what it is, it's pretty effective, and the balance of heart and humor that really worked for me to go along with the creepier aspects, the sound of Megan more so than the look of Megan. But I thought it all came together pretty well. And again, the performances by the two leads, Violet McGraw, who can't be older than 12, I wouldn't say, or actually maybe not even 10. And of course, Allison Williams, who we've come to know, she's got her foot in a few horror movies now. And I don't know. I always find her intriguing in the movies like Get Out and some of the other ones that she's done. I think she does a good job, and she does a good job here. So, yeah, I mean, again, you're not going to get blood and gore in this movie. It's PG-13. You're not going to be overly scared by it, but I would say it's a fun movie that's more horror than comedy, but it does have comedy and some fun aspects to it. That's my best way to sum it up. So 7.5 out of 10 for Megan. You might ask why I'm not giving a higher mark, because I don't want to blow my load too much on this movie, considering that I'm kind of doing this review off a whim and having just seen it in the last 40 minutes. I'm sure once I sit down, watch it again, and do a full blown review probably at some point later this year, then you'll probably get the full version. But I can say I like it more than I don't. So, yeah, spoiler-free review, as I said. So I would definitely recommend to go check out M3gan. You won't be overly disappointed as long as you kind of know what to expect going into it. But thank you for watching this review. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a happy new year so far. Thanks for watching this review for M3gan, and stay scared. Bye.